When Every Which Way But Loose hit theaters, it shocked audiences with barroom brawls, biker gangs, and raw humor that turned the film into box office gold. But 48 years later, the truth behind the scenes is finally coming to light. The cast endured brutal accidents, sudden deaths, and fortunes earned and lost after the cameras stopped rolling. Stay with us, because this story hurts more than you expect. Clint Eastwood as Philo Beddoe. Philo Beddoe, the truck driver and bare-knuckle street fighter in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by Clint Eastwood. At 48 years old, he stepped into the character with a battered masculinity that felt both comic and quietly worn. The role revealed a man drifting through fights because he had nothing left to prove. That uneasy mix of humor and damage landed because it already lived in him. Born May 31st, 1930 in San Francisco, California, Eastwood grew up during the Great Depression in a household shaped by instability and constant relocation. His father's shifting jobs meant a childhood without roots, and school became another place of rejection. He was held back, expelled, and marked early as a problem rather than a promise. Those years taught him endurance, but they also planted a cold independence that later hardened into emotional distance. His private life fractured alongside his rise. He married Margaret Neville Maggie Johnson in 1953, remained with her for decades amid infidelity, and divorced in 1984. Later, he married television journalist Dina Ruiz in 1996, only to separate and divorce in 2014. Between and beyond those marriages were long, complicated relationships and children spread across different lives, leaving a trail of unfinished bonds. As his career deepened, films like Dirty Harry fixed his public image, while Unforgiven later earned him Academy Awards and reframed him as an artist of moral reckoning. Age brought confrontation rather than rest. Heart concerns and the sudden death of his father forced him to face mortality early, and that awareness seeped into his work. He turned inward as a filmmaker, telling quieter, heavier stories and winning further Oscars with Million Dollar Baby. Each project felt less like ambition and more like accounting. Today, Clint Eastwood is 96 years old. He remains active as a director and producer, moving deliberately, speaking little, working when he chooses. His estimated net worth of about $375 million reflects control rather than excess, decades of ownership, restraint, and distance. Sondra Locke as Lynn Halsey Taylor. Lynn Halsey Taylor, the ambitious country singer in Every Which Way But Loose, was portrayed by Sondra Locke. At 34 years old, she shaped the role with a calm cruelty that cut deeper than anger. Lynn did not shout or strike. She withheld, manipulated, and vanished when love demanded presence. The pain she inflicted felt disturbingly practiced. Born May 28, 1944, in Shelbyville, Tennessee, Locke entered the world already abandoned by her father and raised by a mother worn down by factory work. Her childhood was marked by silence, emotional scarcity, and the early knowledge that affection could disappear without warning. As a teenager, depression settled in and ambition became her shield, achievement replacing intimacy. She learned to perform strength because vulnerability had never been safe. Recognition arrived without protection. An Academy Award nomination for The Heart is a Lonely Hunter promised a future that never fully materialized as her career became tangled in power imbalances and creative confinement. Her personal life deepened the strain. She married sculptor Gordon Lee Anderson in 1967 in what she later described as a non-consummated, companionate marriage that lasted until her death. Parallel to that marriage, her long relationship with Clint Eastwood blurred love and control, ending in years of emotional erosion, public erasure, and brutal legal battles that drained her psychologically. When acting opportunities narrowed, Locke fought back by directing, reclaiming authorship through films like Impulse. Then illness arrived with merciless timing, breast cancer that returned, spread, and demanded relentless treatment. The stress of lawsuits, professional isolation, and physical decline stripped her visibility from Hollywood. She did not fade gently. She was slowly pushed out. Sadly, Sondra Locke died at 74 years old on November 3, 2018, from cardiac failure related to advanced breast and bone cancer. Her death was kept quiet for weeks, revealed through records rather than tributes. She was cremated, her ashes returned to her husband Gordon Lee Anderson, and much of her passing went publicly unacknowledged. With an estimated net worth of around $20 million, she left behind not closure, but a hollow silence. Geoffrey Lewis as Orville. Orville, the loyal, sharp-tongued older brother in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by Geoffrey Lewis. At 43 years old, he gave the character a worn humor that felt earned rather than performed. Orville laughed easily, but the laughter carried the weight of a man who had learned to survive by standing beside others. His presence grounded the chaos, quietly holding the story together. Born July 31, 1935, in Plainfield, New Jersey, Lewis grew up in financial strain after his parents' early divorce fractured any sense of stability. Childhood meant frequent disruption, limited guidance, and the pressure to become self-reliant far too young. Education came in fragments, interrupted by the need to work, and emotional security was something he learned not to expect. Those years etched anxiety and resilience into him long before the cameras arrived. For years, his personal life mirrored that instability. 3 marriages, multiple divorces, and the responsibility of raising 10 children stretched his finances and his emotional reserves. Professional respect finally grew through long collaboration with Clint Eastwood, and performances in films like Thunderbolt and Lightfoot and the haunting television adaptation Salem's Lot proved his range beyond caricature. As work accumulated, so did exhaustion. More than 200 roles filled his resume, but few brought lasting security, and the grind of constant appearances left little space for rest. In later years, Parkinson's disease and dementia quietly eroded his strength, even as he tried to remain active. Finally, Geoffrey Lewis died at 79 years old on April 7, 2015, after suffering a heart attack while exercising at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital. He had been battling Parkinson's disease and cognitive decline near the end. With an estimated net worth of about $5 million, he left behind a large family, a body of work spanning decades, and the quiet ache of a man who gave everything to the craft and asked for little in return. Beverly D'Angelo as Echo. Echo, the vibrant and romantic presence in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by Beverly D'Angelo. At 27 years old, she infused the role with warmth, volatility, and a spark that cut through the film's rough edges. Echo was playful, emotional, and alive in a way that unsettled the men around her. That electricity came from someone already fighting to be seen. Born November 15, 1951, in Columbus, Ohio, D'Angelo was raised in a highly artistic household shadowed by a strict and demanding father. Creativity was encouraged, but affection came with conditions, pushing her into rebellion during her teenage years. Music became her first refuge, then illustration, and finally performance. Confidence on stage masked deep insecurity off it. Success arrived unevenly, and personal life only intensified the strain. She married Italian nobleman Don Lorenzo Salviati in 1981, a union that ended in divorce, and later entered a long, painful relationship with Al Pacino from 1997 to 2003, marked by legal battles over custody of their twins and relentless public scrutiny. Professionally, she endured where many disappeared. Roles in Coal Miner's Daughter earned her a Golden Globe nomination, while the National Lampoon's Vacation series turned her into a cultural fixture. Yet even acclaim did not shield her from exhaustion, legal stress, or the quiet cost of aging in Hollywood. Her career became selective, appearances spaced further apart, the spotlight less forgiving. Now, Beverly D'Angelo is 75 years old and continues to act sporadically, choosing projects carefully while maintaining distance from constant exposure. Her estimated net worth of around $20 million reflects decades of film, television, and music work. What remains is not just success, but survival. Ruth Gordon as Mama, the sharp-tongued, iron-willed mother of Philo in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by Ruth Gordon. At 82 years old, she turned maternal authority into something unruly and unforgettable. Her ma was not gentle or sentimental, but fierce, loud, and emotionally honest to the point of discomfort. Laughter followed her lines, yet underneath it was the voice of a woman who had survived far worse than her son ever did. Born October 30th, 1896, in Quincy, Massachusetts, Ruth Gordon grew up in poverty, in a household destabilized by her father's early death. She was forced to work young, long before childhood had finished shaping her, learning endurance instead of safety. Education came unevenly, interrupted by necessity rather than choice, and the absence of security hardened her spirit. As she aged, roles vanished, doors closed, and she was quietly pushed aside for being too old. Her personal life carried its own quiet sorrow. Her marriage to writer-director Garson Kanin, though loving and stable, never brought children. Then, against all expectation, redemption arrived late. Rosemary's Baby shattered Hollywood's age barrier and earned her an Academy Award, followed by enduring acclaim in Harold and Maude. Fame in old age came with irony. She became celebrated for embodying eccentric elders just as her physical strength declined. Yet she kept working relentlessly, writing, performing, and appearing in film and television well into her 80s, refusing to disappear again. Sadly, Ruth Gordon died at 88 years old on August 28, 1985, after suffering a stroke at her summer home in Edgartown, Massachusetts. Her husband, Garson Kanin, was with her until the end, after 43 years of marriage. She was laid to rest without spectacle, leaving behind an estimated net worth of $10 million earned through acting, writing, and sheer persistence. John Quade as Chola Chola, the blunt, swaggering leader of the Black Widows biker gang in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by John Quade. At 40 years old, he gave the role a mix of menace and clumsy humor that made the character memorable rather than disposable. The danger felt real because Quade understood it intimately. Born April 1, 1938 in Kansas City, Kansas, Quade grew up in rural hardship, surrounded by limited opportunity and financial strain. Stability was rare, and self-reliance arrived early, replacing comfort with endurance. Education led him not toward art, but labor, railway repair shops, engineering work, and physical jobs that left little room for imagination. Acting was never a dream. It was an accident that changed the direction of his life. Hollywood narrowed him quickly. Marriage added pressure rather than relief. His long union with Gwendolyn Rice, though lasting 38 years, was marked by the strain of raising 6 children on unstable acting income. Career respect came late, through repeated collaborations with Clint Eastwood, and films like High Plains Drifter and The Outlaw Josie Wales proved he could act far beyond intimidation. The later years grew quieter and stranger. After leaving acting, Quade turned inward, becoming politically radicalized and increasingly isolated. Health declined, and the strength that once defined him faded without ceremony. Sadly, John Quade died at 71 years old on August 9, 2009, after suffering a heart attack in his sleep at his home in Rosamond, California. With an estimated net worth of around $2 million, he left behind a large family and a career built on faces audiences remembered, but names they rarely learned. His story ended the way many character actors' lives do, quietly, after giving more than they were ever given back. Bill McKinney as Dallas Dallas, a hard-edged member of the biker gang in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by Bill McKinney. At 47 years old, he gave the character a quiet menace that never needed to shout. Dallas stood slightly apart from the chaos, watching, calculating, ready to turn cruel without warning. It was the kind of danger McKinney understood too well. Born September 12, 1931, in Chattanooga, Tennessee, William Dennison McKinney grew up in deep instability, moving more than a dozen times before adulthood. Poverty followed the family, and violence was never far. Once, as a teenager, he was beaten by a local gang simply for being from another state. At 19, he joined the U.S. Navy during the Korean War, serving on a minesweeper under constant threat. Hollywood offered opportunity, but at a brutal cost. After his unforgettable and disturbing performance in Deliverance, McKinney was locked into sadistic villains and cruel authority figures. His personal life fractured alongside his career. He married Felicity June Bach, Janelle Booth, Donna LaManna, and Norma Shannon, with each marriage ending in divorce, leaving behind emotional exhaustion and one son, Clinton. Artistic respect arrived through repeated collaborations with Clint Eastwood, especially the outlaw Josie Wales, but peace never followed. As years passed, work never slowed, yet rest never arrived. McKinney continued acting into his late 70s, even branching into music, recording an album while quietly battling declining health. Decades of smoking caught up with him, and esophageal cancer began its silent, unforgiving advance. Still, he kept working, filming commercials and writing his memoir almost until the end. Sadly, Bill McKinney died at 80 years old on December 1, 2011, from esophageal cancer at his home in San Fernando, California. He was strong enough to work just weeks before his death, a cruel contrast to the disease consuming him. With an estimated net worth of about $3 million, he left behind a career built on fear, intensity, and endurance. James McEachin as Herb, a steady, grounded friend of Philo in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by James McEachin. At 48 years old, he brought calm authority and moral weight to a film dominated by chaos. Herb was observant rather than loud, a man shaped by experience rather than impulse. That quiet strength came from real wounds. Born May 20th, 1930, in Rennert, North Carolina, McEachin grew up under the constant pressure of racial discrimination in the segregated South. Opportunity was limited, dignity fragile, and safety never guaranteed. As a young man, he joined the U.S. Army and was sent to the Korean War, where he survived a near-fatal ambush that killed almost everyone around him. He was awarded the Silver Star and Purple Heart, but the trauma followed him home. Marriage offered stability. He wed Lois Emma Davis in 1960, and together they raised 3 children, but professional barriers remained relentless. His breakthrough came with Tenafly, followed by long-running work in Perry Mason films, proving a black actor could carry intelligence, restraint, and moral gravity without stereotype. In later years, McEachin turned away from constant acting toward writing, using words to process history and injustice. His books explored race, war, and American conscience, earning literary awards and respect he had waited decades to receive. Though less visible on screen, his influence deepened, especially within veteran and black cultural circles. James McEachin died at 94 years old on January 11, 2025 in Los Angeles, after a long life marked by service, restraint, and quiet resilience. He was laid to rest without spectacle, mourned more deeply by readers and veterans than by Hollywood headlines. With an estimated net worth of about $4 million, his legacy rests not in fame, but in dignity. Walter Barnes as Tank Murdoch. Tank Murdoch, the legendary underground fighter in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by Walter Barnes. At 60 years old, he brought real physical authority into the role, not theatrical bravado. Every movement suggested a man whose battles had already been fought long before the camera rolled. Born January 26, 1918, in Parkersburg, West Virginia, Barnes grew up immersed in physical competition and discipline, where strength was currency and weakness was punished. Football became his identity early, a path that demanded pain tolerance and emotional restraint. Military service during World War II reinforced that mindset, teaching him obedience, endurance, and silence. By adulthood, his body had already absorbed decades of impact. After football glory with the Philadelphia Eagles, 2 NFL championships that should have secured comfort, Barnes found himself starting over. His marriage to German actress Britta Wendel brought brief stability and 2 children, including future actress Laura Wendell, but the relationship collapsed under distance and career pressure. Overseas work in Europe kept him employed, but never protected him from financial anxiety. Returning to America did not bring relief. Roles came sporadically, health declined steadily, and diabetes began to control his life rather than the other way around. By the late 1980s, illness forced him into retirement, and he spent his final years inside the motion picture and television retirement home, far removed from stadiums, film sets, or applause. Sadly, Walter Barnes died at 79 years old on January 6, 1998, from complications related to diabetes. He passed quietly, leaving behind an estimated net worth of about $2 million earned across football and film. His story closed not with triumph, but with endurance. George Chandler, as DMV clerk, the weary DMV clerk in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by George Chandler. At 80 years old, he turned a few minutes of screen time into something painfully familiar. His clerk wasn't cruel or comic by force. He was tired, resigned, and quietly defeated by routine. It felt less like acting than confession. Born June 30, 1898, in Waukegan, Illinois, Chandler grew up inside vaudeville circuits, learning early that applause was temporary and survival depended on constant motion. Comedy and music paid the bills, not ambition. Education gave way to performance, and stability was something other people seemed to have. He learned to disappear into roles because standing out was rarely rewarded. Hollywood used him endlessly and remembered him selectively. More than 300 roles, bartenders, clerks, shopkeepers, messengers, each interchangeable, each anonymous. Marriage to Catherine Ward offered genuine stability until her death in 1963. Even as he became recognizable on television in Lassie, real security never fully arrived. Age did not free him. It narrowed him. As studios replaced character actors with younger faces, Chandler accepted smaller roles without complaint. Cancer crept in silently while he continued working, refusing to stop even as his body weakened. George Chandler died at 86 years old on June 10, 1985, in Panorama City, California, from complications related to cancer. With an estimated net worth of about $5 million, his legacy remains fragmented. Familiar faces without remembered names. A lifetime of presence that Hollywood rarely stopped to thank. Roy Jensen as Woody, the hardened biker in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by Roy Jensen. At 51 years old, he didn't fake menace. He embodied it with the stillness of a man who had already absorbed years of physical punishment. Woody moved like someone who knew pain intimately, not as performance, but as habit. The danger in his presence came from restraint, not noise. Born February 9, 1927 in Calgary, Alberta, Jensen's childhood was defined by displacement and labor, rather than comfort. His family migrated south, and survival meant physical work, logging, construction, anything that paid. Football became both escape and discipline, demanding toughness while offering fleeting structure. By the time adulthood arrived, endurance had already replaced innocence. War and sport carved his body long before Hollywood ever noticed him. Military service during World War II hardened him further, and professional football in Canada taught him how disposable bodies could be. Acting arrived through stunt work, where risk paid better than dialogue. Films like Chinatown and Soylent Green gave him visibility, but rarely mercy. He was cast as muscle, threat, or obstacle, never relief. Marriage brought moments of grounding and fracture. His first marriage to Barbara Ann Dionysius ended in divorce, leaving him with children and emotional distance. Stability came later with Marina Petrova, who remained with him until the end. Still, the work was relentless, and cancer slowly replaced strength with fatigue, role by role, year by year. Sadly, Roy Jensen died at 80 years old on April 24, 2007, in Los Angeles, after a battle with cancer. He left behind an estimated net worth of $3 million, earned through decades of physical risk and uncredited endurance. His legacy isn't tied to stardom. It lives in the faces audiences instinctively feared, never knowing how much real pain stood behind them. William O'Connell as Elmo, the jittery biker in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by William O'Connell. At 48 years old, he turned weakness into tension, letting fear leak through every gesture. Elmo wasn't comic relief by design. He was a man constantly bracing for impact. The humor came from how close he always seemed to collapse. Born May 12, 1929, in Los Angeles, California, O'Connell's early life appeared stable on the surface, but discipline arrived through service rather than comfort. The Korean War introduced him to authority, obedience, and loss, shaping a personality that understood anxiety as survival. When he returned home, acting became a controlled way to express what couldn't be spoken. Hollywood quickly found a use for him. Nervous barbers, cornered clerks, uneasy authority figures, roles that mirrored a man permanently aware of consequences. Performances in high planes. Drifter and Star Trek cemented his reputation as the face of quiet panic. He worked constantly, but never loudly, existing just below leading man visibility. William O'Connell died at 94 years old on January 15, 2024, at his home in Sherman Oaks, from natural causes. With an estimated net worth of $1 million, his life closed gently, without spectacle. He left behind a body of work built on restraint, proof that fear, when played honestly, can be just as unforgettable as power. Dan Vadis as Frank. The towering biker in Every Which Way But Loose was played by Dan Vadis. At 40 years old, he brought raw physical dominance rather than performance tricks, standing like a man carved from muscle and silence. Frank didn't need dialogue to intimidate. His presence alone suggested volatility. He felt less like a character and more like a warning. Born January 3, 1938, in Shanghai, China, Vadis came into the world already between cultures. Of Greek descent with roots on the island of Chios, his early life was shaped by migration, instability, and reinvention. Physical strength became his language, first through bodybuilding, then through military discipline as a U.S. Navy serviceman. By the time Hollywood noticed him, his body already told a story of control and endurance. Italy gave him stardom before America ever did. Sword and sandal epics turned him into a modern Hercules, where speed and agility set him apart from other muscle men. When that genre faded, he adapted again, slipping into spaghetti westerns and later into American productions alongside Clint Eastwood. Films like High Plains Drifter and The Gauntlet used him as an instrument of force, efficient, expendable, unforgettable. Behind the strength, however, cracks deepened. Vadis was married to Sharon Jessup, and together they had a son, Nick. But stability never fully took hold. Addiction followed him quietly, eroding discipline the way time erodes stone. On June 11, 1987, he was found dead in a car in the California desert, the result of an accidental overdose involving alcohol and heroin morphine. He was 49 years old, leaving behind an estimated net worth of $1 million and a career defined by physical power that ultimately couldn't protect him from himself. Gregory Walcott, as Putnam, the no-nonsense police officer in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by Gregory Walcott. At 50 years old, he carried authority without strain, the kind that comes from years of standing just off-center in Hollywood. His calm suggested experience rather than ambition. Putnam felt credible because Walcott never overplayed control. Born January 13, 1928 in Wendell, North Carolina, Walcott grew up with military structure shaping his instincts. Service in the U.S. Army during and after World War II gave him a bearing that casting directors trusted instantly. Lawmen, officers, and professionals followed him naturally, not because he demanded attention, but because he didn't. His career stretched across more than 100 films and television appearances, often in supporting roles that held stories together without recognition. He became permanently associated with Plan 9 from Outer Space, a film he later regretted, yet ultimately accepted as his strange cultural footprint. Westerns, police dramas, and collaborations with Clint Eastwood kept him working steadily, even when stardom remained out of reach. Walcott's private life was defined by consistency rather than chaos. He was married to Barbara May Watkins for 55 years, and together they raised one son and two daughters, a rarity in an industry built on impermanence. After her death in 2010, his world quietly narrowed. Tragically, Gregory Walcott died at home in Canoga Park, California, on March 20, 2015, from natural causes. He was 87 years old, with an estimated net worth of $2 million. His legacy isn't tied to leading roles, but to endurance, proof that Hollywood history is built as much by steady presences as by stars. After 48 years, the faces we laughed with in Every Which Way But Loose carry scars time never showed on screen. Some disappeared into silence, some fought private battles, and some never made it to old age. Which story shocked you the most? Who would you like us to uncover next? Comment below, like the video, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood after stories.